So in this course, you learn a lot about the structure of information. I give you an entire set of terms and a tool set for decoding, encoding, representing, describing, displaying the structure of information. And I think those are very valid tools. But I wouldn't like to leave you with the idea that now you have completely understood the structure of information. And as an example of how paltry really what we know how to do today is compared to what there is to do, let's take a paragraph from any book, any magazine, anything you want. One paragraph. So look at any paragraph of text. Now, when we tag that paragraph of text, to what level have we really encoded the structure that's in that paragraph of text? Really very little. In fact, most paragraphs of text that you'll see in this class are really untagged at all, except for maybe one tag that says, this is a paragraph. Now imagine all the possible things you could say about any paragraph of text. You can talk about the relationship between the words in each sentence. You could talk about the meanings of the words in each sentence. You could talk about the logical structure of the ideas in the sentence. You can talk about any arguments that the sentence and the paragraph and the sentences inside the paragraph make. You can talk about all the allusions and constructions that are reminiscent of some allusion to something literary or something figurative. You can talk about all the names and all the people that are mentioned. You can talk about all the objects that are mentioned and all the qualities of all the objects. I'm only just scratching the surface of what the true structure of a single paragraph of text is. Now think of an image. What's the structure of an image? The most that we'll ever tag about an image is its size and maybe a file name for that image. But is that nearly the structure of the image? How about the color structure? How about the composition of the image? How about all the objects in the image? How about the relationships of all the objects to each other in the image? You can go on and on and on. We barely scratched the surface of the true structure of information in this class. So while what we're doing is very important, it's not really getting at the fundamental structure of the information. Now while I'm on this course, I'd like to mention one other thing. People often talk about structured information and unstructured information, and what they mean by that is information that's now in a database, that's structured information, and information that's in free text and images and media, the stuff that we generally work with, and that's called unstructured information. Well, I'd like to arm you with something to say the next time anybody says, oh, what you're dealing with is a bunch of unstructured information. The real point is the information in the database is so simple that its structure can be decoded. The information that's in free text is so complex that its structure can't even be hinted at by any computer. So far from being unstructured, the kind of information we work with, I'd like to say, is hyperstructured. It's so sophisticated in its structure that no computer could possibly begin to decode it. And even if a computer could decode it, we would not want to go through the motions of tagging it. So there's a philosophical issue here that I think is worth just touching on. I don't want to wax into philosophy here, but our interpreters are really dumb. Computers require us to dumb down our information so that they can automatically work with it. Human minds are very sophisticated, very subtle, very complex. We invented language. Language is an amazing structural system to structure ideas and concepts, to put relationships together. And in fact, language is quite a bit of what we skirt around in this course. However, we do a lot of naming, and naming is language. So we simplify things. We create the idea of metadata, and metadata is outside the information describing the information. But if you read a paragraph of text or you look at an image, you don't need any metadata to interpret that. Your mind does a perfectly good job just by simply reading the words. That's what we're missing. That's what we can't do. That's what we're not yet able to do. That's what I hope you go forward from this class and start to be able to think about. How do we get beyond metadata? How do we get beyond describing things to truly being able to unpack and automate the interpretation of the language itself, the image itself, the sound itself, the video itself? And I would contend that that's more than a life's work. If anybody listening to this throughout history even figures that out, then I would applaud them, because that's a very big task. To do what we do naturally, to decode things in our mind, to be able to interpret language as language, not as fragments of data that's applied to the language. That's a very good thing to be able to do. That's something that we're not even close to being able to do. So is what we're doing nonsense? Is it ridiculous? Is it not worth doing? No, of course not. What we do is we winnow down the information, we add information we add extra information, metadata to our information, so that it can be automatically collated, automatically displayed, automatically distributed. We really only need to encode enough to get that information in front of the eyes or ears of the person who's consuming it, and then it's up to the person who's consuming it to do the rest of the interpretation. So the job we're asking of our information structure is really a small job compared to the total job of interpretation. The total job of interpretation is to figure out what's the structure of the information, what's the logic of the information, what does it in essence mean. The point of the information structuring that we do is simply to allow that information to be moved from place to place. It's almost like we're moving luggage. And as long as that luggage ends up in the right destination, as long as it's on the conveyor belt when the person comes to pick up the bag, that's fine. Now, how does it get to that destination? It's meta-tagged, right? There's very, very little information that's necessary to get that information to the right place at the right time in the right way so that it can be picked up by the person who's then going to use the contents. Notice that the meta tag on a piece of luggage does nothing about the insides of the luggage. It says nothing about what's inside there, and there's a lot of stuff inside there. And in fact, it's what's inside that really counts, and the outside, the baggage, is simply a vehicle for getting it to that place. So just like we meta-tag luggage to move it from place to place, we meta-tag information to move it from place to place, and we don't imagine that we're doing anything like figuring out the true structure of that information. So in conclusion, even though this is a course in the structure of information, really we're only just scratching the very, very, very surface of understanding structure. But what we're really doing is creating a system that's going to allow us to move this hyper-structured information from place to place so that people can consume it and figure out the structure for themselves.